Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. And going into the upcoming CDL season, one of the big questions has been on the salaries. What are the players getting paid now compared to what they used to be getting paid a few years ago? We know that the salaries are regressing somewhat. A lot of these teams are running out of money and cutting back salaries. But Octane and Zuma and others have revealed what they were getting paid back in the day on some of the big name organizations. Far less, absolutely, than what the majority of players in the league are getting paid at this very moment. Very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I greatly appreciate it. First of all, wanted to mention Modern Warfare 3 versus potentially XDefiant. Now, aBeZy has been given a lot of optimism, and for good reason, about all the leaks over the last few days. As I've said before, I don't want to get too ahead of myself here. It's early days in terms of how good this game might be. We've heard loads of rumors. Every year, COD gets us hyped up for the new game. And, okay, maybe it's going to be better than the average game for the last couple of years. Is it going to be great? I'm not necessarily, betting my hat on it or anything. And another part of things is going to be the spawns. The rumor was the other day that they are putting the new Vanguard spawns into Modern Warfare 3. Supposedly they fixed the Vanguard spawns at some point and they became way better, and that same spawn logic is going into the new title. With any luck, that'll be the case. aBeZy hopes, look, just give me some readable spawns and we really are cooking for at least a decent Call of Duty title at the very least. But other games definitely need to step up how things are going, because COD has, well, let's just say regressed somewhat over the last couple of years. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And certainly in terms of people actually playing the game, Modern Warfare 2 was, I believe, a pretty big downhill trajectory, which might be why Activision have said, look, Sledgehammer, bring us back to some things that we used to have going on to try and get the player base actually playing the game again. But the chance has been here for other games to step up to the plate and try and eat into Call of Duty's advantage in this genre. Halo had its chance, let's be honest. Halo Infinite came out, and there was a lot of optimism around that game, especially from the competitive perspective. I'm not exactly sure why Formal isn't happy with this particular change, or I don't really understand the nuance behind the situation. But Formal was talking here, one step forward, two steps back. Lots of talk about the way that 343 have mishandled Halo Infinite as a not just a competitive product, but also just the game in general. The other big point around this time of the season was meant to be XDefiant. I was of the opinion, or at least I believed, that Champs would end, and within a month maybe of Champs ending, XDefiant would launch. The pros would play a lot of it in the off-season, and, so XDefiant is the game that ACHES is working on. Mark Rubin, of course, who used to be top guy, I think, at Infinity Ward, or at least something like that. He went over to Ubisoft to work on this project, and on the 7th of July, they talk about how so the game has to get some sort of certification, this candidate master thing, to be approved, and then they can launch it out. And usually there's some sort of round of processes where they, whoever they are applying to, say, okay, you've got to do this, and they have to make some changes, and it takes a little bit longer than they thought, potentially. But apparently they've planned this in. But then a couple of weeks later, then Mark Rubin says July the 30th, we're, in the process of getting approved by these first parties, and we're doing the tests and all this type of stuff, and it's taken longer maybe than they would wanted. He says this is an update on the process. Nothing has changed in our anticipated release timeframe. They kept saying the summer, but I mean, we're kind of running out of time here in the summer, let's be honest. I mean, as soon as it gets to kind of September, we're kind of talking autumn, fall, whatever. So, yeah, it doesn't really seem like it's going to launch when it was intended to. And as Ake said, when something comes out the oven, it looks delicious, but you can't eat it yet. That brief period of time feels like forever, but it's always worth the wait. Now, sure, but the later XDefiant launches, the less people are going to care. And the closer it is to the new COD, and this is the issue, if the new COD is actually quite good, XDefiant will bottle the launch, and I want XDefiant to do well, to be honest. I want some competition for COD. I want to ensure that COD has to stay on their toes in some sense. It's actually trying to make a good game. And XDefiant, I played the beta. I pretty much enjoyed it, to be fair. I think, okay, a few things I might change and tweak around, and people said it felt a bit clunky or whatever, but look, it's a beta version of a game. I think XDefiant can be a really solid shooter, and it encompasses a lot of elements that I enjoyed in COD and would like to see back in COD, and it seems like XDefiant is trying to kind of be what COD used to be in some sense before it went off the path in the last few years, I would argue. That makes perfect sense. The issue is, if it doesn't launch on a reasonable time frame, and it just gets swallowed up by the hype of around the new Call of Duty release, games, then they're kind of going to bottle it, aren't they? So we'll see if it takes too long for them to launch this, because, yeah, I was expecting the pros to be on this game, playing XDefiant, enjoying themselves, and there'd be talk about, you know, XDefiant Pro League. When's the esports scene around this game going to start? I know that many people right now, probably most people, are expecting XDefiant to flop a bit at this point, which is kind of sad because I wish that it would succeed, but I'm kind of more inclined to agree that if it launches later, and this year's COD is actually quite good, and Ubisoft don't really nail it in terms of updates over time and the ranked play mode and the competitive scene, it's not going to be as good as it could be. So I'd like some competition for COD, but I'm not so convinced as it stands that it's actually going to happen, and people will just continue to play other games in the off-season and wait for the new Call of Duty to come along, which of course hopefully is also good, but we'll see about that. As I've said, not yet sold on this one. So Modern Warfare 19 was what I would kind of say started all this off over the last few seasons, and that was the year, probably in terms of average salaries, I would say that might have been the highest season that we've ever had in the CDL, and might ever have, frankly, in Call of Duty esports history. Okay, with inflation, hopefully over the next several years we get back up there, but MW19, that 2020 season was wild. ACHES, in a second, reveals all of his salaries pre-franchising. And the reason why he probably doesn't say his LAG salary is because, like, it was absolutely out of control. I don't know what it was. He was on at least 300k a year, might have been more. So, you know, that translates to something pretty nice at a month-to-month basis. 25k a month or something like that anyway. So he doesn't mention those numbers. He mentions tactically the numbers before franchising came around. We'll get into that, though. And Octane was probably taking advantage of this during that Cold War, or during the Modern Warfare 19 season as well, because apparently that Seattle team was on big money, and these were some of the players that are most notable, I suppose, in their history. Octane didn't win anything for Surge technically, but you know, he was an all-star. He did knock FaZe out of that tournament at Major 5 back in Cold War, so I guess that counts for something, despite that stint on Seattle not being so impressive. And this is a natural effect, right? We even see this in other esports here. I know Rizzo was talking about it on the Rocket League side, right? When as Crimsic says, that's, you know, welcome to the jungle, man, because he's played so many tourneys, won a lot and all this stuff over years, but yet his earnings are getting eaten up by new players that have played the game for a few months. He says, grinded for 5 years just for some kid to pass me in earnings in 3 months' time, which is... it's just how it goes. Inflation for earnings and price pool inflation, this stuff, it happens. And, you know, as the esport grew, some of the money that Crim and the other guys are making back in the day was massively different to what's happening at the present day. And I kind of feel bad for some of the old school players, you know, the likes of Killer and so many great players from back then, like Stainville players like this, basically made no money from Call of Duty esports. If they played in this era... and, you know, there's always talk about eras are, you know, back then they're playing plumbers and all this. I think there's some water that argument holds, but not that much, to be honest. I think that a lot of these players in different eras would still be very good, and they'd be reaping the rewards a lot more from their talent than they were able to back then. But, you know, a lot of the time it was just a pure passion game. We'll see in a second here with some of ACHES' numbers, what he was making salary-wise. There was no salary. Like, they would go to the tourney needing to win the tournament to win the prize money. That was how people made their living back then, and it was a wild time, especially playing that amount of hours a day. So this is what Octane and Methods and Zuma discuss about their salaries during that era, and there's some especially interesting numbers in here.
I think we went... bro, I'm trying to remember my salary back then on those teams. I think for, like, Rise, it was like $2,000 a month. And then LG, it went to... like 45 a month, and I think World War II was LG, so it was 45 a month. And then OpTic, I got matched that year, and then Tom got that deal, and then I joined 100T, and I think I was on like 10 a month or something like that.
My Rise contract was 5K a month, and then E6 gave me 8K a month, and then I left E6 for Rise.
We know.
Yeah. I will not say his.
Yeah, I went from 6K to 20K.
That's nuts, bro.
That's a good contract.
That shit was fucking hilarious. That shit was crazy.
So the big number here that we've known about before was the Zuma number, right? This was the big talking point, where I'm pretty sure this was during World War II when he was on like 6K or so, and OpTic wanted Zuma. They wanted to make a change. Formal was, you know, the dynasty was breaking up, Khan was stepping away, Formal was going to go to LG, Scump and Crim were going to stay around. They wanted to get Zuma in alongside Scump, but they couldn't do so. They tried to get John, it didn't happen, and eventually they had to get stuck with Methods, right? Which was definitely not their optimal target because they wanted an SMG. It couldn't happen, so they got stuck with like so many ARs, and their team didn't do so well at the World Championship that year. And that was partly because Zuma or FaZe had come to Zuma and said, hey, don't join OpTic, we're going to give you 20k a month. And that was like the first big salary that really buffed people up over the next couple of years. People started to get paid big money as a result of that. So Octane on his rise days, we're talking, I guess, Black Ops 3 Advanced Warfare, 2.5k a month this was. Then LG, 4.5k, that's like Infinite Warfare stuff. So that's pretty respectable, solid salary. OpTic matched that, I guess, when he was then bought off that team and went to OpTic for the end of World War II, which is, you know, people would say, oh, you know, the OpTic salary should be bigger than that and all this, but I think they just picked it up. And also, you've got to understand, these organizations vary in how much prize money they give out. So even at the present day, some orgs probably allow their players to keep like almost all of the prize winnings they get from tournaments, but some orgs will take 50% of it. And I think that was what a point that Crimsix made a few years ago. And this is also a thing back in the day as well, I believe, where some teams would say, hey, we'll give you this amount of money a month, but we're going to take X percentage of the prize earnings and stuff, which, to be fair, the organizations need at times. These organizations are struggling to justify a lot of these salaries, so I totally get it. 100 Thieves then was about 10k a month, right? And this is where we're kind of really starting to cook here. So Black Ops 4 going into franchising, that's where the players started to get paid consistently, you know, 6 figures plus for a lot of these guys. And obviously today it's gone up even more than that, right? We're talking, as I say, 2020 season, lots of players on like 300k. The average salary that year was probably like 180 at least. I don't know what the average salary is today. We might be talking like 120, 140. The rumor was that Thieves are not paying minimums. They're paying this because they've cut back, right, quite significantly the salaries this year. They're paying something like 100, 120, maybe 140, something like that. So like a pretty damn respectable salary, absolutely, for these guys, especially for playing Call of Duty all day. But it's not as insane as it was a couple of years ago. The rumors of HyDra having this like 500k contract, which I don't know really exists, but there's something, they're paying him something pretty good, I imagine. So this is ACHES kind of perspective on his seasons, where for his first 6 years of playing COD, and, you know, he was winning multiple championships back during this era, was paid absolutely zero salary. The only ways, and this is like really impressive grind, you gotta say, the only way these guys would make money is by turning up to the tourneys and winning them. And it's not like the prize pools are insane, right? I mean, they would go into tourneys, maybe a 10k prize pool, first place would get like 4k to get maybe a grand each maybe, and that was like a pretty decent tourney back then. Sometimes you'd pocket like $400, $500 for winning the entire thing. So, I mean, that was where the passion was, because these guys came along knowing that if they lose, you know, they can't pay the rent for that month, right? You know, they can't pay for dinner that night. They've got to win the tourney. They've got to make the finals if they want to actually, you know, make ends meet, which just creates immense passion. It's so impressive. I think a lot of these guys did this for so many years, given the circumstances, and built the scene into what it is today, where players can happily just get bombed out of the tournament top 8, top 6, and still know that they're getting a nice cushy salary on their back. And this is, a lot of these guys make the point that the passion isn't quite the same as it used to be. The rivalries aren't quite the same as they used to be, and there's probably a fair point in that somewhere. Now, and this is the big number that everybody knows about as well, that Complexity 2014, the greatest team of all time, basically, in terms of dominance, were getting paid $500 a month. Like, crazy stuff. EG then doubled that up. FaZe then apparently was paying him absolutely nothing at all in 2050, which is kind of crazy to think about it. That's true. And then Envy started to pay some bigger money here, like 2016. Envy at the start of the season was $2,750, then joined Cloud9, and then they had to buy them out, so they got a little bit less money. And then C9 in 2017, Infinite Warfare, paying $4 grand a month, and you see how quickly this goes up here. And of course, we heard talk about, you know, E6 or whatever it was, paying like 8k a month. EG then 2018 7.5k, and then after winning the World Championship, Envy then gave him a massive bag of 13.5 grand a month on Envy, when, like, you know, he wasn't very good that year and the team wasn't very good either. Now he clearly misses out here just before franchising. We want to know what his 2020 deal was. That's what people really want to know, how much he was getting paid on Gorillas, because apparently he completely fleeced them for money, and he would have getting paid like well over 20k, I think, a month on that situation. But, you know, just look at the grinds that Aches had to do to get to this point. So, like, you got to respect it, to be honest. And it does make me feel bad for players, not necessarily aBeZy, because he did play a little bit during franchising, but players as good as aBeZy were, but they were around, you know, 2011, 2013, years like this, getting paid paid no salary at all and just grinding it up to the present day and, well, helping the scene become what it presently is, where some of these guys actually can support themselves on just these CDL salaries. So how is that going to compare to what we see in the present day? We don't necessarily know many of the numbers. We've heard rumors around what some of the players are getting paid, and there was the rumor a little bit ago that Envoy was getting like paid a potentially massive bag from Boston, but he turned it down, like, was it a 400k bag or whatever it was that Octane says? That might not be true, to go to Toronto instead. But there is still big money flying around in this league. I don't know how long it will last. We know that Thieves are cutting back. They're paying like just over 6 figures, which is, yeah, very impressive salary for playing Call of Duty all day. But, you know, still, it's not what it was a few years ago, and there's clearly a correction in play here. You look at this and you see the crazy numbers, well, of a decade ago when they were getting paid like $0 a month compared to the crazy numbers of like 2 or 3 years ago when they were getting paid 25, 30k a month, some of the players, and probably some of them still are. But there is a correction in place right now. The top teams, though, the FaZes, the OpTics, let's say maybe Toronto, maybe Subliners as well, they're still paying these big bags. It might regress a little bit over the coming years, but OpTic is still paying the big bag. Like, we know that to be true, which is one of the reasons that continues to make that move so attractive. But very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.